Hi everyone, I'm Jen and welcome to GRA 220, Intro to Digital Imaging. I'm going to post mini lectures on Monday, kind of explaining what your assignment's looking for, maybe what some of the reading is, just to kind of help you out along the way. Feel free to always send me emails though if you have any specific questions or post on the discussion board. I can always do little mini videos on a specific tool or topic, whatever interests you. So let's dig on in. So this week we're looking at chapter 2 and chapter 3 in your book. This book is very, very beneficial. I would highly recommend that you look through it several times. It has great examples, photo examples, exactly step by step on how to do things. But this week we're going to be learning about the principles and elements of design. Elements are things that you mostly use without even realizing it. We're focusing on line, shape, form, all that kind of stuff. Principles, on the other hand, I like to kind of think of if you were in a band or an orchestra. These principles are going to be your balance, your emphasis, your rhythm, harmony, all that kind of thing that goes into making a beautiful song, we can kind of use to go into making a beautiful piece. With these principles, we've got the use of positive and negative space. You need a spot for your eye to kind of rest. Sometimes designers think that we have to fill the page and it has to be jam-packed of information, color, picture, all this kind of stuff. But your eyes kind of lose focus and don't know what to actually look on. So you want to make sure that we do have that nice balance of positive and negative space. You also want to focus on hierarchy. What do you want the viewer to look at first? Then where do you want them to go from there? Blah, blah, blah. We kind of want to shove things in the viewer's face. It's your job to tell them exactly what's important and where to go from there. With emphasis, we can also look at the rule of thirds. I'm sure a bunch of you have already been using this or heard of it, but it's basically if we draw kind of a pound sign or a number sign along a piece, anywhere that there is a corner where those lines meet, that's where kind of the focus of your piece should be. If you don't believe that this is something that's actually in use today, take a look at, the news or Dateline or something where they're interviewing people. Put, little dots. I don't know if you actually want to touch TV, but you can put little post-its or anything right on your TV and then see when the main focus or the interviewer or interviewee comes into that spot. Happens a lot. You can even play a game. Sometimes I say like, oh, let's all put a post-it on the TV and see what lines up with most. Pick one of those corner spots, you'll win, hands down. This week you'll also look at typography and color theory. These are things that, depending upon which project you pick, have already been chosen. But it's still really important to think about what do those colors mean, or what does that typography feel like, why are they choosing these, and what kind of emotion or feeling are they trying to bring from these. With your whole, term assignment and getting these advertisements for, your specific client, you want to think about your target audience. Unfortunately, a lot of times we have to do projects that aren't necessarily for us. Like if we were in the target audience, sometimes it works out really great, but you need to really think, am I focusing on 5-year-olds? What would they be interested in? Or am I focusing on the elderly? Do I need to make the font bigger for them to see? Different things like that. Now, of course, with our projects, we have a very specific clientele, but always be thinking about that when you're going to design. All right, so Photoshop. We're gonna take a look at Photoshop today. Your book really breaks down this toolbar on the side here. So if you ever have any questions on, what any of these tools are, feel free to ask me, but you can always look in your book. There are also hotkeys for all of these tools, and you can see that a lot of the tools have a little arrow next to it. So if you click and hold, you can see what tool's behind it. And the great thing is you can see the hotkey that's next to it as well. As much as possible, we want to be able to quickly design, design smartly. So you want to get used to using some of these hotkeys. That being said, you don't have to just always be like, oh, VQP, enter, but you want to be using them to your benefit. All right. So, somebody had asked on the discussion board what kind of turning it in document do I want. I really would like your Photoshop files. You should always be keeping your Photoshop files. You never know when you're going to want to go back and change something or tweak it or use it a little bit differently. And if you only save it as a JPEG or a TIFF or anything like that, you won't have the benefit of having all of the layers and having the raw image files in there. All right, so all Adobe products are kind of very similar. You'll have your toolbar, you have all the options at the top, space here, your layers over here. You can always adjust things to be differently. Window, workspace, you can change things up or hide and bring up any sort of windows that you would like. So I just have this image here. I don't know where all of you live, but I could definitely go for a nice, warm, sunny day about now. Being in Chicago, it's been okay, but it's not super warm. But we've got an image here, and I want to show you kind of what different adjustments we can make with this. All right, so let's take a look at some of these adjustment layers that you're going to be using in your assignment. I just brought in a photo, did a file open, and you'll see that when you bring something in, it puts it on the background layer. By default, this background layer is always locked. I double click it, hit OK, and now it's unlocked. You can always click on the layer, layer 0, layer 1. If you double click, you can rename it. So, scene 1. Then hit enter to have it set. You really want to get used to labeling your layers. It will make things very, very convenient when you've got, 5 or 10 layers and maybe one is just a cloud or something like that that you've layered on top. So make sure to get in the habit of naming. Quick note with layers, whatever layer is on top is what you're going to be able to see. Okay, layer order does matter. So if you have a bunch of layers and then you start remixing them around, it's going to change what you're going for. All right, so adjustment layers. We can go into layer, new adjustment layer, and here are all the different options that we can play around with. I'm just going to start with the top one real quick. So brightness contrast. You're always given the option to give it a name. You can, or you can just hit OK. So brightness, changing the exposure on the image. You can bring it up, turn it down. Contrast can kind of desaturate, it lowers the highlights and brightens the shadows, or the opposite, darken the shadows, brighten the highlights. All right, so you can play around and see whatever you like. You can always turn the eyeball off on a layer to see the difference it's making. And now again, remember, because layer order matters, if we do this again, new adjustment layer, and let's say I'm going to bring up levels. So levels actually shows you, we've got an RGB here, so we're in color for the web, right? So we have RGB versus CMYK. RGB is for web. It is made up of light, okay? All colored light can be made up of red, green, and blue. The absence of light is black, and surprisingly, when you shine all three, it becomes white. So when your computer is off or your TV is off, that's why it's black and you don't see any color. Versus CMYK, where we have K, which is actually the black channel, because the colors cannot mix or subtract to create black. If you mix cyan, magenta, and yellow together, you actually get like just a muddy brown. So that's why the black channel is introduced. This will be very important because with your assignments, you're doing some for web, some for print. So you want to pay attention to what color property you're in. Another thing that's important is your resolution with each of these. Now with print, a lot of times we do a minimum of 300 dpi, which is dots per inch, aka dropping printer dots. For web, generally they do 72 ppi, which is pixels per inch. This is a pretty small resolution, but the higher the resolution you go, the bigger the file it is. So how frustrating is it when you go to a website and it takes a long time for things to load? It's because there's just a lot of information there. So we want to keep that in mind. But anyway, back to our levels. You can actually remove, kind of heighten. So these are all of your colors, the output levels, blacks and whites. So we're actually kind of darkening or lightening depending upon which end we grab from. So you can see I'm brightening, bringing up the whites in the image because I am removing the darker areas. Or I can do the opposite. You can also move this mid-tone. All right. So you can turn the eyeball off, on. I'm not going to keep this levels one, so I can always hit the garbage can to trash it. Oh, I trashed the mask. I'll do this. And there we go. So you want to play around with these. I would suggest if you're new to Photoshop, kind of clicking on each one and adjusting and seeing what you can actually kind of do with it. Hue saturation, we're changing the actual color of things. Be sure that you're paying attention. At the top here you have some options. So let's say you want to change everything, or you just want to change like the cyans or magentas. So for example, if I go into the master, starting to change some of our tones. Let's see if we can make it completely different here. So we've got yellows and oranges, purples in here. Saturation, removing the color. So if you lower saturation, you're desaturating, you're removing that vibrance and bringing it down. If you crank it up, you're getting the most, if I can grab it, here we go, the most vibrant colors possible. So you're really kicking it in there. And then lightness is adding white. Let me bring this back to be a little bit calmer. All right, so lightness is adding white. So if we go all the way, it's just going to be a white image, or all the way down, it's going to be a black. Just trying to think, exactly how do you want to bring out those shadows? How do you want to create that nice contrast of color? All right, so we can grab, let's say, the blues. So it's keeping kind of, there's going to be tints of blue in a bunch of things in your image, but it's changing mainly, the blue parts here. All right. I'm going to, I'll just turn off the eyeball. So my regular image, if you go into image here, there's some auto tone, contrast, and color that you can play around with. Make sure you're on the actual layer with your image. But those are things to take a look at. Do you like it? Do you not? Sometimes it's a nice tool to help you out, but you don't want to rely on just the auto. You want to be able to do the adjustments yourself. So I'm going to undo. Actually that looks pretty nice. Don't forget that if you're going to undo, you can't just Control Z or Command Z for more than one undo. So on a Mac, we actually are Command Alt Z or Control Alt Z to keep going backwards. You can see here, it'll tell you the hotkeys. All right, so you can look at your autos. Let's see what auto contrast. Not a big difference. Auto color. Auto color kind of made the whole thing more blue. I think I'd want to bring out kind of the green and the sand in the foreground. Some other tools to just kind of start you off. Your crop tool or the letter C. You can also kind of rotate and fix your image. And then you can hit enter to set it. Sorry about that. We have dodge and burn. looks like the lollipop and a little hand. That goes back to when we were developing photos and the chemicals and shining the light to actually burn the negative onto the paper. So you can brighten and darken specific areas of your piece. So it doesn't have to always be the entire piece. If you wanted to make an adjustment layer on just a certain section, you're more than welcome to do that as well. We have our magic wand and the quick selection tool. Let's say I wanted a specific area of the sky to be different. Of course, you'd have to go in and actually deselect the branches, but for the sake of this lecture, I'm just going to do this, and then I can do new adjustment layer, and we'll do exposure, which is very similar. So you can see I'm bringing down the brightness only to that specific spot. Okay, so you don't have to do your whole image at once. It's nice that you can kind of pick and see what you like about it and change it. You'll also notice in your layers that we can see kind of the mask as to what's actually being edited. All right. So for this week, I would kind of pick your images or take your images, scan them on in. It's always beneficial if you can use your own images, very portfolio worthy. You can say, you know, these are mine, I took this, but totally understandable if you cannot. Just make sure that you are citing your sources. It is very important that anytime that you use something that isn't yours, you're giving proper credit. Then once you find your images or scan them in, I would look at it, think again, who's my target audience, who am I trying to appeal to, and what kind of feeling or emotion or what am I trying to send to them. And then look at your image and think, okay, what parts of that equal what I was looking for my target audience, or what do I want to bring out, or what do I want to accentuate. Then you can use your adjustment layers to bring those parts out. Okay, again, showing your audience what's the first thing they should look at, why is it important. All right, so good luck this week, and feel free to let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to talking with you on the discussion boards. Bye.